I still recall how the mahogany table shone in the warm light from the chandelier, and how the aroma of roasted chicken permeated the room as if nothing had happened, and my entire world hadn't just been upended. Wait, what? My voice was sharp enough to shake the cutlery in the dining room. Dad swirled his dark wine glass as if he hadn't just gutted me with a single sentence. Without looking up from it, the golden son, Jason, was leaning back in his chair, grinning as if he had already won the lottery. When Mom's eyes shifted to him, he had, in a sense. "You're making Jason the CEO?" I looked into their faces in the hopes that someone, anyone, would tell me it was a joke. There was no joke, though. It sounded as though Dad had made this choice long before tonight. Jason has leadership qualities, Kelly. Leadership. The same Jason who, in his 20s, was unable to hold down a job. The same Jason who had twice burnt through his trust fund before stumbling home with a fresh batch of half-baked ideas and empty pockets. I had dedicated my entire life to Anderson Home Goods, including early mornings and late evenings, collecting up every broken fragment Jason left behind. I muttered, "I've been working here for 8 years," in a strained voice. "I rebuilt the supply chain. I negotiated every major contract." Dad cut me off and said, "You're great with numbers," as if I were just a devoted secretary. But Jason, he inspires people. Something snapped within me. I glanced at Mom, looking for a lifeline of some sort. Though it seemed more like a slap, her gentle smile was intended to calm. "Sweetheart, you're so serious. Maybe it's time you focused on something smaller. A little side business of your own. A side gig." As if I were a kid pretending. Jason wore the smug, lazy smile I detested since we were children, stretching his arms behind his head. "Relax, Kel. You'll still be involved. You know, in a support role. Role of support." I was having trouble breathing. They had made up their minds beforehand. Long before I had even taken a seat, the entire affair was tied up in a tidy little bow. I was just the daughter who would never be enough, and Jason was the son who was perfect. I got up so quickly that my chair scuffed the floor, the sound like a razor cutting through the tension. "Fine." Mom paused her smile. "Kelly," my voice was dangerously calm as I asked, "You want me to start my own business? Watch me." As I left, Jason's laughter followed me. It should have felt liberating to leave that house. Yet I was only angry. Not the kind that causes you to hurl objects or scream. This was the sort of anger that seeps into your bones. The kind that keeps you up at night, reliving every exchange, every betrayal, and every instance in which you were made to feel inferior. On that night, I didn't cry. I made a plan. I didn't turn around the night I left that house. The city lights blurred through my windshield as I sped through the deserted streets. My fingers clenched so tightly around the steering wheel that my knuckles became white. Anger, embarrassment, and betrayal were all weighing down on my ribs like a heavy burden, and my head was spinning. A side gig. They spoke as if I were a young girl playing store, as if I hadn't worked for almost 10 years to keep their business going while Jason snatched every chance he was given. The anger had become something colder by the time I returned to my small apartment, having become ingrained in my bones, sharper. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the wall, allowing every detail of that meal to come back to me, including the smug smile on Jason's face and the sympathy in my mother's voice. They believed they had me confined. They assumed I would lose it and start selling scented candles or making cookies from home. They were unaware that I had already studied every weakness in Anderson Home Goods Foundation for years. I was going to burn down their entire house now. I worked through the night, writing down my thoughts in an old leather notebook until the pages were chock full with half-formed plans, numbers, and doodles. It was easy to see what they were doing incorrectly. As the world went online, they continued to cling to the old, including wholesalers, physical stores, and expensive goods that lay collecting dust in showrooms. I had been trying to persuade Dad to update the supply chain and move into e-commerce for years. However, he had always waved me away. Online businesses aren't stable, Kelly. Well, they weren't either. I had my blueprint by dawn. Bamboo cutting boards, organic cotton towels, and ceramic kitchenware are examples of eco-friendly, minimalist home goods that are of excellent quality, reasonably priced, and designed for a market they were unaware existed. Not the country club spouses they catered to, but young women building their first houses. I was familiar with the vendors. I was aware of the logistics. I was fully aware of how to make it work. There was only one issue. I had no money. I didn't have rich parents or a trust fund to cover my blunders as Jason did. I barely had enough money for rent, and that was all I had left over from my paycheck. For hours, my heart pounded in my chest as I gazed at the meager amount in my savings account. I wouldn't have anything if this didn't work. If I didn't try, though, I would prove them correct. For my first set of product samples, I wired my entire retirement fund, every last cent, to a small firm in Vietnam. I had never done something so terrifying. However, fear no longer mattered. With my eyes burning from tiredness, I watched YouTube tutorials at 2 in the morning while building the website myself. During those first few weeks, I hand-packed every order that came in, wrote every product description, and took pictures in my small kitchen. A handwritten note of gratitude was included with each box. Each dollar was immediately reinvested in inventory. I ran advertisements in the afternoon, responded to customer support emails in the morning, and fell asleep every night with my laptop still poised on my stomach. And I kept it a secret the entire time. Not my folks, not Jason, not even my closest pals. I was going to fail in quiet if I was going to fail. I almost broke over the first month. The advertisements hardly made a difference. One by one, orders poured in, not enough to dispel the doubt that was nagging at the back of my mind, but enough to keep the lights on. With each dashboard refresh, I could hear Jason's voice in my mind. "You don't have the experience to make this work." I buried that sound beneath every early morning and every late night. However, what is the reality? I was afraid. Then one night I heard my phone vibrating when I woke up. I initially assumed there was a bug because I was getting notifications more quickly than I could swipe them away. With my heart racing, I sat up in bed and scrolled through the incoming orders. 5.10. 50. It was over 5,000 by dawn. Unbeknownst to me, a tiny influencer had ordered one of my bamboo cutting boards, raved about it, and shared it with her 2 million followers. I had sold out my whole inventory by the time I was able to regain my breath. Packing boxes, pleading with suppliers to expedite new orders, and responding to emails until my fingers cramped kept me up for 3 days in a row. When I first saw 6 digits in my bank account, I hid myself in the bathroom and sobbed until I had nothing left. I continued to reinvest every dollar, strengthening the supply chain, increasing the range of products, and negotiating better prices with manufacturers. I made my first $1 million in sales in 3 months. By the 6th month, $5 million. Anderson Home Goods staggered, and I watched from the shadows. The cracks were first minor old coworkers whispering about stalled shipments, irate suppliers, and growing costs. While the warehouse sat half empty, Jason attempted to reposition the company as trendy by investing money in ostentatious ad campaigns that made no sense. He didn't want to hear from somebody who truly understood the company because he was too proud. The figures also don't lie. Sales fell off. Customers left. Without a single physical store, I was outselling them by a 5-to-1 margin by the time the holidays arrived. I ought to have felt bad. Seeing them drown should have made me feel something. But my only emotion was contentment. Jason had been presented with the empire on a silver platter. I was using my bare hands to construct one out of dirt. After 6 months, I finally spoke up. I wore a fitted navy dress, a diamond bracelet that I had purchased with my own stupid money, and my hair pulled back into a low bun when I arrived at a cousin's wedding. Jason's face twisted in that lazy sneer I'd detested since we were children as he looked at me from the other side of the room. "Kelly, still selling dish towels online?" I returned the smile. "Yeah." I then leaned in so that only he could hear me. "Last month, I made more than your entire company." The color faded from his face. Before he could even formulate an answer, I turned to leave. They had made fun of me. I had been kicked out. However, what about being undervalued? It increases your hunger. You become dangerous as a result. And I had only just begun. The heat inside of me grew even hotter as the 6 months stretched into 9. I invested every dollar I earned back into the company. Every night of insomnia felt like gasoline. I ate dinner standing up at the kitchen counter while packing orders, and I didn't care that my eyes were vacant. The wrath, the hunger kept me going. I could feel the ground moving under me as my small side business surpassed $5 million in revenue, and I was certain they could sense it as well. I began to hear rumors from friends we had in common. It was sinking Anderson Home Goods. Jason had attempted to cover the fractures with costly advertising campaigns and rebrands, putting a new coat of paint on a foundation that was already decaying. However, the clients weren't naive. They noticed the price increases. They observed the postponed shipments. They witnessed a business frantically striving for relevance without having any idea what they were doing. Dad still wouldn't acknowledge that he was wrong. Mom still thought Jason was infallible. However, family loyalty is irrelevant to the figures. Their sales had fallen 40% by Christmas. Suppliers were leaving by spring. By summertime, they were circling the bank. I ought to have felt sorry. I ought to have stepped in, offered assistance, and played the good daughter. However, all I could think about was the sound of Dad's voice at the dinner table that evening. "You're great with numbers, Kelly, but you don't inspire people." Okay, now look at me. When the phone call eventually arrived, it had been precisely 1 year since I had left that house. My cell buzzed on the desk as I was flicking through partnership ideas in my office, my workplace. "Dad." I let it ring till it nearly went to voicemail while I kept my eyes on the screen. Then I responded, "Kelly." He spoke in a tight, controlled voice, as if he was clinging to what little pride he still had left. I tapped my pen against the surface while leaning back in my chair. "Dad!" A protracted hush ensued. "We need to talk." I grinned. It was there, the time I had been anticipating. I set up the meeting at my workplace for the following morning. Not at Home Goods in Anderson. Not in some stuffy eatery where they could act as though the balance of power hadn't changed. With their contempt still echoing in my ears, I wanted them to enter my world and see what I had created. Upon their arrival, I observed them entering the lobby through the glass window. Mom's eyes widened and she was astonished as she surveyed the gleaming marble floors and the walls covered in pictures of my top-selling items. Dad had a pallid face. Jason appeared to prefer chewing glass over being present. I gave them 15 minutes to wait in the lobby, which gave them time to process their embarrassment. I then summoned them. With floor-to-ceiling windows facing the city skyline, my office was twice as large as Dad's former corner apartment and was saturated with natural light. As they shuffled in like strangers, I sat calmly behind a glass desk. Mom made an effort to smile. "Kelly, this place is beautiful." I didn't waste my time acting as though the compliment had any significance. I flipped through a file as if I had 100 more important things to do. "Let's cut to the point," I remarked. "What do you need?" In an attempt to evoke that ancient authority, Dad cleared his throat, but his voice suddenly had a crack in it. Jason's had some difficulties, challenges. They were referring to it by that name. I wanted to chuckle. Even though Jason had completely destroyed the corporation, they were too arrogant to acknowledge that they had given him the kingdom while treating me like a mere assistant. With a whisper, "We need your help, Kelly," Dad added. I folded my hands on the desk and carefully leaned forward. "Say that again." He tightened his jaw. "We need your help." I ought to have declined them at that very moment. Just as they had thrown me out of their lives, I ought to have thrown them out of my office. However, I wanted to see them writhe. "I'll help." Mom's face brightened as relief filled her expression. It appeared as though Jason had just swallowed glass, but on one condition. Everyone leaned forward. "You work for me." The quiet was overwhelming. Jason got up, scraping his chair back. "You've got to be joking." I gave a charming smile. "You need jobs, don't you?" Dad got crimson in the face. Tears filled Mom's eyes. Jason's nostrils widened as if he were about to pierce the wall. I listened to the silence, relishing each moment. Take it or leave it. First, Dad's shoulders drooped. Mom looked at him, anticipating a retaliation. However, he didn't. At last, Jason clenched his teeth and spat the words out. "Fine." They believed that would be the end of the humiliation. They believed that I would hide them in a comfortable office where they could maintain their dignity. However, I ensured that Jason organized the warehouse for the next 6 months. Dad acted as an unpaid intern, making cold calls to vendors and haggling over prices. While working in customer service, Mom apologized for each irate email that was sent. My coffee was brought to me. They responded to me. And each time Jason started to grumble, I reminded him with a smile, "You're a natural leader." I could have left them hanging on the strings that used to be wrapped around my wrists indefinitely. However, I didn't want them in the vicinity of my construction. I summoned them to my office one final time a month later. I presented them with severance agreements that were generous enough to allow them to leave without a fight, but not a dime more than they were due. Mom broke down. Without saying a word, Dad sighed. Jason hurried away without giving me a handshake. Small, damaged, and forgotten, they left my building the same way I had left theirs. I didn't see them again. Something began to settle within me in the weeks that followed, as if I had finally let go of the burden I had been carrying all my life. Without their funds, assistance, or consent, I had established my kingdom. They weren't necessary for me. I didn't. Making them pay isn't the best kind of retaliation. They are becoming obsolete as a result. I watched from my office window as they left my building on the day they signed their severance papers. Their shoulders slumped beneath the weight of their own failure. Mom held her purse close to her breast and stared at the sidewalk, as if she wanted to blend in with it. Dad was half expecting me to call them back, and he kept looking over his shoulder. However, Jason bounded out without even looking. He was unable to bear it. He couldn't accept that, as he destroyed his own empire. The tiny sister he had ridiculed all his life had created an empire. I watched them fade into the distance while I stood with my arms folded. I was expecting to feel something. Contentment, possibly even remorse. However, I had nothing left for them inside of me. The months that followed were filled with late hours, meetings, and launches. I could feel the weight of everything I had accomplished bearing down on me every time I entered my office, yet it never broke me. I gave the business everything I had, diversified into new product categories, including eco-friendly cleaning supplies, linen sets, and kitchenware. In New Jersey, we established a warehouse, employed a logistical staff full-time. We were generating $12 million in revenue by the end of the year. Jason's business? Lost. Their warehouse was taken by the bank. The remainder of their stock was sold for pennies on the dollar. He had burned the kingdom to ashes after they had given it to him. I would occasionally receive brief updates via the grapevine. Mom and Dad had left the state to live in a quiet little town in Florida, where they could act as if nothing had occurred. Jason was trying to find the next quick fix, the next shortcut, while jumping between failed startup ideas. He was still the same. He would never. A mutual buddy once reported seeing Jason at a dive bar one night, half drunk and boasting about working on the next big thing. How many individuals had he fed that line to over the years, I wondered? How many people still believed him, I wondered? I stopped monitoring when we reached $20 million in revenue. Now they were relics, names spoken at family get-togethers with sympathy. Nobody ever tells you that the long, steady unraveling of revenge is what makes you happy, not the explosion. Observing, as you construct something greater, with your own hands, while someone chokes on the life they believed they deserved. They weren't suffering because of the true victory. It was that I was no longer in need of them. I was holding a crystal trophy at the fastest-growing e-commerce brand of the year awards, 1 year to the day after I had fired them. Loud and far away, the applause barely touched the surface of the woman I had become, and it swept over me like static. With my heart thumping in my chest, I approached the microphone. At the edge of the room, I could sense their ghosts, Jason's smug little giggle, Mom's pathetic smile, and Dad's dismissive sigh. Their voices were still in the back of my mind. "You're too inflexible. Although you're really good with numbers, you don't motivate others. Consider starting your own small side business." Leaning into the microphone, I let the silence linger. A few years ago, someone told me I wasn't leadership material, that I was too serious, too rigid, not the right fit for success. There was a rumble of whispers among the audience. I grinned. I'm standing here tonight because I refuse to let anyone decide my worth but me. Even though the applause was loud, I could hardly hear it. I left their spirits where they belonged and strode off that platform with a proud head. My assistant knocked on my office door the following morning while displaying her phone. "You'll never guess who just called." I knew before she even spoke the name, so I quickly looked at the screen. "Jason." With my thumb over the answer button, I picked up the phone. Then, without thinking, I hit decline. All their lives, they had underestimated me. They were no longer even a part of my world. A year went by. The air felt lighter on the day I signed the lease for my third warehouse, as if the final strands binding me to the ghost of my family had finally broken. I saw forklifts move pallets filled with my products, including linen collections, bamboo kitchen sets, and everything else I had constructed from the dirt they buried me in, as I stood at the edge of the loading dock. Every label has my name on it. My name, my empire, my triumph. After that last phone call, neither Jason nor my parents contacted me. When you're winning, though, the universe has a funny way of going back around. Sarah, my assistant, came in one evening as I was closing the boutique, holding her phone as if she wasn't sure whether to give it to me. You need to see this. Halfway down the page was a local news article, the kind of story that no one was particularly interested in. Former CEO Jason Anderson declares bankruptcy after failed business venture. For a long time, I gazed at the headline, feeling nothing, not satisfied. No pity, only finality. The specifics were almost lyrical. Jason had attempted to build a half-baked software company, promising investors the same illusory hopes he had been peddling all his life. The funds ran out. The investors withdrew. The Golden Sun was completed in an instant. I didn't finish reading the article before closing it. Some people look for a means to change their own mistakes throughout their entire life. For years, Jason had been pursuing that opportunity. However, the next big thing did not exist. Not for him. A familiar name appeared in my mailbox 2 weeks later. Topic? Coffee? I looked at the screen for so long that the letters became hazy. Mom was there. I nearly erased it. Nearly. However, some spirits remain until you confront them directly. Neutral Ground, a little cafe downtown, is where we first met. She appeared smaller than I had remembered when she entered, with thinner hair and softer eyes. She said, "Kelly," as if my name were something delicate that she was scared to shatter. I didn't grin. I didn't give her a hug. I simply waited with my hands clasped around my coffee cup. She said, "I'm proud of you," following a prolonged period of silence. The words ought to have had some significance. However, they didn't. It was years too late. Her eyes darted about as if she was unsure where to look as she stirred her coffee. "I miss you." I slowly reclined, allowing the silence to envelop us. "You didn't miss me when I walked away." She flinched. "We thought you'd come back." I chuckled to myself, a harsh, biting laugh. "You thought I'd fail." She didn't dispute it, since she was aware that it was accurate. In the echo of all the years they had never trusted me, we sat there, until I was the last thing left standing. They had all said I wasn't enough while grinning sweetly. I realized that I had run out of things to say by the time the coffee cooled. An apology was not what I wanted. I didn't require resolution. Without them, I had constructed my own. She reached out as if she wanted to hold my hand as we got up to go. After letting her fingers touch mine for a little moment, I withdrew. "Goodbye, Mom." I left that cafe without turning around. I had a glass of wine that evening while I sat in my penthouse apartment, looking through sales statistics. Below me are the lights of my realm, the metropolis. I had been the forgotten daughter for 14 years, the contingency plan. The boy who could do no wrong was followed by the shadow. They were the ones disappearing into the distance now. And the person seated on the throne was me. Watching them fall isn't the finest kind of retaliation. It's flourishing without ever having to turn around.